Samurai Sentai Shinkenger, or Samurai Squadron Shinkenger, where Shinkenger is a portmanteau of the Japanese word Shinken, meaning true sword, while also being an onomatopoeia for the clashing sound a sword makes, and the word ranger, is a show about samurai fighting evil demons called the Gedoshu, hailing from the Sanzu River in the depths of hell, terrorizing the earth to bring about fear and destruction to empower their home, ultimately hoping to flood the earth. The Shinkenger are 5 particularly powerful samurai, each from 5 particularly powerful houses, reaching back some 17 generations. The current generation, led by the 18th head of the Shiba clan, Shiba Takeru, or Shinken Red, is united to combat a resurgence of the Gedoshu after their apparent, albeit always decidedly temporary, loss to the 17th iteration of the Shinkenger. The current generation of wards, Ikanami Ryunosuke, Shirai Shimako, Tanichaki, and Hananori Kotaha, along with Shiba Takeru, aim to fight and defeat the Gedoshu leader Dokok. With their magical super awesome kanji powers and super fantastic origami robots, making Shinkenger probably the most unadulteratedly Japanese experience in Super Sentai. This of course marks Shinkenger for some of the worst adapted material into the Power Rangers brand.
I know I said I'd never mention Power Rangers again, but well, here we are. The reason I bring up Power Rangers is because it's frightfully important to understand why Power Rangers Samurai failed. It's because Shinkenger succeeded so very well. I mentioned in a previous episode, I believe it was the Goseiju episode, that when Super Sentai fails, it typically fails because the themes fail to interact with the narrative progression or the characters or anything like that. The plots, the whole thing seems to just fundamentally fall apart around what it's trying to do. Typically this is a result of a theme mix-match or a theme misappropriation or a failure of launch with the characters and the way they interact and the way they're built. It all comes back down to the same thing though, a failure by the showrunners or the writers or the director or whomever the failure may fall upon to properly inject the theme into the show. When we look at Samurai Sentai Shinkenger, the injection of the theme is pretty much perfect. It hits the characters, hits the narrative beats, hits the narrative proper, hits the Shinkenger's Megazords, the Shinkeno, the origami rather, hits how they use their power, hits the bad guys, base of operations, hits their motivations, hits everything, hits the colour grade for crying out loud, hits the music, hits the sound effects. If you break down every single series of Super Sentai to the base narrative elements, you have basically the same structure, and it very much relates to how you might play a level of a video game. Where in a level of a video game, you start at the beginning, you're introduced to your characters, they fight a whole heap of drones. Once they're out of the way, there's a boss, a couple, medium level bad guys. You beat them; they're a bit harder to beat. Then you get to the next stage, which is your mini boss, and then there's probably a recurring boss throughout the level. And then at the very end of the level, there's your big boss, who you have to kill through all the means and power-ups that you've gained throughout the previous level.
And so in summary, if you take Samurai Sentai Shinkenger and apply 3 criteria to it by which to judge it as a good installment into the Super Sentai series or not, and if you take these 3 criteria as universal rules to apply to each series of the Super Sentai, you have first, does it appropriately inject its theme into its narrative? Second, does its narrative follow this structure in a way such that you are not being beaten over the back of the head with it? And third, are the characters actually interesting and appealing to the viewer? In the case of Samurai Sentai Shinkenger, you have 3 big ticks each and next to those criteria.